almost everything in the body because everything is connected. So it is really important to kind of connect the dots like this and understand that inflammation is the thing. So okay, so what are we going to do about this? This is a lot of information. I understand that there's all this breakdown. There's some things in my control. There's some things that aren't in my control, but we're going to focus on what is in our control. And that's what the resources are. And so basic concept is work on the parasympathetic, work on rest and digest, work on mind body connections, on muscle mass, sleep, and diet. We're going to get into each one of these things. Okay. So, what is the preferred food plan? I'm sure many people have different opinions about this. My personal opinion about this is about feeding the gut microbiome. The gut bugs in our gut give us there's 100 trillion colonies of gut bugs in our gut. And remember, the oral flora also matters. Our teeth, our hygiene of our gums, very important because things that happen in here also can affect here and in our brain. And we're learning more and more that oral hygiene can be connected to things like heart disease, dementia, many, many inflammatory conditions in the body. So also focus on oral hygiene. But the gut bugs give us 3 million genes. We have 23,000 genes as humans. Our gut bugs give us 3 million genes. So we are a function of our gut bugs because why? They not only digest our foods and take in the nutrients, but they also are in charge of our metabolism. They give us neurotransmitters that communicate to our brain. They help us think, they help us concentrate, they affect our mood. They can also affect the way we age because the types of gut bugs that we have can make us more or less resilient to incoming stressors. How do we get our optimal gut bugs? Well, we want to eat fiber and we want to eat diversely. So every single food that we eat that's plant-based can grow a bug. And what we want is we want an army of good guys. Because when we eat bad foods and we don't digest properly and we have a lot of inflammation in our gut or our thoughts are really bad or we take lots of antibiotics, bad bugs start to grow. So what do we want to do is we want to fortify ourselves and become resilient. So we want lots and lots of fiber. And fiber, prebiotics, probiotics are things that you hear about that help foster and grow good bacteria. The foundation of that are things like fruits and vegetables. Lots of fruits and vegetables. I tell my patients 7 to 10 servings a day because they are loaded in not only nutrients, each color of the plant or what you're eating will give you multiple different nutrients, but it'll also give you multiple different antioxidants, anti-inflammatory potentials. These are tools that our body gets from the plants and foods that we eat to fight off the bad guy. When we have stress in our body from pollution, from sitting too much, from thinking negative thoughts, we get oxidative stress in our body. We need plants to offset that oxidative stress, and those are antioxidants. Plants are loaded with them. Grains are loaded with them. Nuts and seeds are loaded with them. So everything on this slide is loaded in not only things called phytonutrients, which are lots and lots of micronutrients and nutrients our body needs to survive and do all those reactions that we need every day, keep us energized and vital, but also it turns on and off good and bad genes. So say I was predisposed to something like rheumatoid arthritis. In our gut bugs, based on the stressors we have, those genes can get turned on and off. So we want to fuel the bugs that keep those genes calm and keep those inflammation markers down. And that can happen when we eat diets that are high in fiber, that are diverse. I ask my patients to shoot for 35 to 50 grams of fiber a day. I ask them to create a diverse microbiome because each food that we eat, if I had raw kale, it grows one bug. If I had cooked kale, it grows one bug. If I eat onions raw, it grows one bug. If I cook the onions, it grows another bug. So you can diversify your diet in many ways, even with the same foods. But I ask my patients, can you do 30 different inputs of food in a week? Okay, it sounds like it's hard. But if you think about it, if I have a smoothie and I put blueberries and blackberries and kale in there today with cinnamon, with nutmeg, with oat milk, with chia seeds and flax seeds, I got 8 right there. So lots of ways to layer this in in many different avenues of your life. So it's not as hard as it thinks. You just got to start thinking about it. Maybe every time you go to the grocery store, you pick up a different fruit. Oh, I had kiwi last week. Let me try dragon fruit. Let me try an orange this week. You can diversify your berries. You could have blackberries and blueberries and goji berries and strawberries, and all of them are important, but maybe you do different versions of things every week. So that's the way you diversify. Also, remember, spices are wonderful. We have a whole chapter of spices in our book because it's so important. But spices are little packed, high energy pockets of lots and lots of good nutrients, which have lots of antioxidants, lots of different colors, that they can incite lots of power into our foods that help us fight the bad guys. So a little pinch of turmeric or a little pinch of oregano or little pinches of, all of the rosemary into something is amazing. So think about spices, and they also count for that, towards that 30. So tips for healthy microbiome. I say shop in the periphery of the grocery store. Try to get the most whole food version of the store of the food. So what does that mean? Maybe apples instead of applesauce. Think about nuts and seeds and legumes. Lots of fresh produce if you can. As the weather's getting better, at least in my area, we're going to have more farms. We're going to have more farm to table options. We're going to have more farmers, bringing their produce out into communities. And so it's a really great time to eat seasonally, eat organic if you can. It's not essential, but these are things that are really very easy to do as the weather gets nicer as well. Drink lots of water. The water issue is very variable in each area. And there's a website called ewg.org, which kind of lets you know what your water problem is in your zip code. An excellent resource for lots of things, including how much mercury is in fish, what are the dirty dozens, which are the ones that you should try to get organic versus the ones that are not necessarily the safer 15, which is usually the ones that are not as essential to get as organic. EWG.org does a really good kind of summary every year that changes based on what's out there in the soil and the water and those kind of things. So, essentially, basically, if you can eat organic, again, not critical. What's more critical is whole foods, lots of them, lots of fruits and vegetables, high fiber, and diversification. So if you can get those three concepts down, that would be a lot better. And then you can branch off on that and see how you feel. There are also categories of foods called prebiotics, which give us the food to grow many bugs, right? So a lot of people take things called probiotics, which come in bottles, but they usually have 1, 2, maybe 7 or 8 strains max in them. And they are fixed a number of bugs, good bugs, that our body does well with. But remember, we have 100 trillion colonies, and we have 100 to 150 main strains of key bacteria that are essential for our livelihood and to keep us well. So when you think about a probiotic, it's good, but it's not the end all be all because it's just giving us the same version. So when people do take probiotics, I ask them to change it up every 3 months. But what prebiotics do is they are foods for the bugs. So they grow lots of different bugs. And this is chicory and onions and asparagus. And, you can see this list and you can find them in the grocery store. And they're not all, really easily found. Like Jerusalem artichoke is hard to find. But you don't have to do all of it all the time. You can just start with onions. You can start with bananas. You could start with things that are easier to find. So what you don't want to make this is a difficult, I have to drive 10 miles to that one grocery store that has this thing. Don't make it hard. Make it easy. Make it something at your local grocery store. You can make lots of changes very quickly with local stuff. So these are just resources, but you definitely don't have to do all of it. Probiotics I've listed here because this is also a question I get all the time. But honestly, you can create anything that's fermented. So typically probiotic foods are fermented foods. And I will tell you, as I have gone through my years of working with people with dysfunctional guts, not everybody can handle probiotics. Not everyone can handle fiber right away. Not everyone can handle prebiotics right away. It's a function of what your gut bugs are today. So if you are eating some of these things, Dr. Rao told me to eat this, I feel horrible when I eat this, it's because your gut bugs are not there yet. And we have to work slowly towards getting those gut bugs to be able to tolerate things. So you can start with maybe kefir, or you could start with maybe something that's like a sauerkraut, 1 teaspoon a week, 1 teaspoon a day, and just kind of grow your good guys. If you're someone who says, I talk about legumes and beans a lot as one of the most powerful foods for aging and longevity and also keeping our gut bugs happy, but not everybody can tolerate them. So what I'm talking about is really starting off slowly. And just because you can't tolerate beans, which could be for multiple reasons, your body's not making enzymes, you don't have enough stomach acid, and maybe the bugs in the gut right now are not favorable for it. But what we want to do is allow you to maybe start with more of a restricted diet, but then create an environment where the gut bugs grow and you can eat more things that are going to be tolerable for you. So say you can't eat black beans. Well, maybe you try red beans. Don't discount the entire food group because of the fact that one particular thing was hard. Maybe you cook it and you add something called hing, which is asafoetida, which is a spice that helps break down the coating of the beans so that you're not as intolerant to them. So there's many little tricks you can do, but don't discount plant groups as a whole large group because of the fact that, your one particular episode was not great. And I will tell you, there is no perfect diet for everyone. These are concepts, and this is why working with someone who kind of knows about different options for you as you heal and as you create balance in your body will be very, very helpful. But again, these are general concepts. Remember, add back spices. These are some of my favorites. There are so many spices. My cookbook has spices in there, but we're not limited to those spices because these are easy to find. I love fresh ginger, turmeric. I make teas with them in the morning instead of coffee. I have a turmeric ginger clove tea, which is super yummy. It wakes me up. It's very anti-inflammatory. It heals the gut. For example, the spices that I love, and I love them because they have lots of medicinal value. Remember, in old times, wars were fought over spices because they had tons of medicinal value. Turmeric is one of the strongest anti-inflammatories that we have. Turmeric has been shown to help with things like, cancer preventions and Alzheimer's disease. And, there's a lot of data out there on the value of turmeric. But essentially, cooking with it on a regular basis versus taking it as a supplement is also a really reasonable place to start. If you need to take it as a supplement, please work with your doctor. It does have some blood thinning effects. It does need to be combined with black pepper and piperine in terms of its benefits when you're using it. Ginger, an incredibly good gut healer. Ginger is great for nausea. It's also great for pain. So I love fresh ginger. If you can just shred it into water, if you can use it more in your foods, wonderful. Garlic is a blood thinner. It's a great anti-inflammatory. It also has great antiviral activities. Rosemary is actually an anti-stressor. People used to smell rosemary because it lowers our cortisol, but it's a wonderful aspect of the Mediterranean diet. Some of the aspects of Mediterranean diet, which isn't discussed, is actually the role of their spices, like rosemary and oregano. Basil has also lots of benefits, and cinnamon is great for sugar control. And cloves are the strongest antioxidant potential out there. So I kind of throw it in my tea, one little clove. It also has antibacterial properties. So lots and lots of values of spices. I've done whole lectures on spices, so I won't get into it, but just please consider spices when you think about adding to that diversity of 30 different things, when you think how overwhelming that sounds. But you can use this in one day. You could have used all of these spices and you would have 8 going towards that 30 in the week, right? So it's very possible to do this with just liquids as well, not just foods. Okay, I just want to spend a second on how to read a label because I'm always kind of shocked at even how physicians, we've never been trained in this, right? So we don't know what this means, but there's a little bit of just general facts that I want to talk about on how to read a label. First of all, I think everyone should get into the habit of looking at the foods you're buying. I had just told you to try to do things that are whole foods, not boxed, in the periphery of the store, which don't have boxes in them, which don't have jars and things. But, we're not going to all be perfect. So when you do look at a label and you're starting to look at things, look at, first of all, this is the old and the new. So most of the nutrition label should be what it says on this side, because of the fact that they've tried to include added sugars, which was very sneaky before they didn't add those. So you didn't know how much added sugar you were getting. And we really want to limit these added sugars to zero. We don't want added sugars. So first thing you look at is, what is my serving size? My serving size is 2/3 of a cup. It is not what's in the whole box, is not 230 calories, right? It is that serving size. And that gets to be really tricky, because some things are 1/4 cup and you're using 4 cups and you're thinking, I've only had 230 calories, but no, you've had 4 times that. So total fat is also listed here, and it lists it based on an RDA recommendation of what this daily value should be. And I will tell you that this changes, this saturated fat percentage will change based on the fact that you have heart disease or don't have heart disease. You don't want a lot of saturated fat at all, because of, if you do have anything that's predisposing you to heart disease. So the saturated fat, you look at that to see what that is. We want zero trans fats. Trans fats are very inflammatory. We don't want any of that in there. And that should be taken out of most foods. There was, I think there was a few years ago, they decided that trans fats were very, very dangerous for us, so that we shouldn't put anything in our foods, but still on labels, that's why we check. Cholesterol also, oral cholesterol also in foods, right? So this is the way we actually, very few foods actually have cholesterol in them that increase our cholesterol. A lot of our cholesterol comes from genetic predisposition and what our liver is doing. And most of the signals for the liver is oftentimes carbohydrates. So just because you're eating no cholesterol foods doesn't mean your cholesterol in your blood work is going to be low. So sodium, very important to look at for lots of cardiovascular issues, and we want to also minimize that. We want that to be under 2,400 milligrams for the day, but that's being generous. We probably want most people under 1,200 milligrams for the day. And total carbohydrates are also very susceptible to your own issues. If you're diabetic, if you have insulin resistance, if you're trying to use for weight gain, weight loss, but not all carbs are equal. So do not shy away from carbohydrates, because most plants, most fruits, vegetables, grains, and even nuts and seeds have carbs in them, and they're so powerfully wonderful for us. So we don't want to shy away from carbs in general. We want to add fiber. So we want to look at this number called fiber. We also want no sugars. Added sugars is a big no-no. I would not do anything that has an added sugar. I believe this particular box was from a rice. So why the heck would we want to add sugar in a rice, right? So, but we do. There's lots of weird things that you wouldn't consider, and that's why looking at labels is very helpful. Proteins, also very, very important as we get older, and you'll see that certain, even rice, wild rice, red rice has more protein than white rice. So that might be a better option for some of us, right? So, and then they list the nutrients in there that are higher, but you're not going to get a lot of vitamin D from foods. One of the things that I often supplement in most of my patients is vitamin D, just because you're not going to be able to get it as easily through foods. Calcium, iron, potassium, they list things, in as a function of how much is in there. There's definitely more stuff in here, but this particular part of the label does not list all the ingredients. But this is just looking at, your carbs, proteins, and fats, and added sugars, which I think is really important to do as you're learning how to feed the gut microbiome and how to do better for your gut. Okay, so the other concepts, which I'm not going to get too much into, is because insulin resistance and diabetes is so prevalent and such a crux of the root cause of so many of the other medical problems that I see, like diabetes and with cognitive dysfunction and with weight gain and with polycystic ovaries, metabolic syndrome, so many issues, including for infertility. It does come down to how quickly does that food turn into sugar. Remember, I said all carbs are not bad. And I do believe that, but you want to look at how quickly things turn into sugar. If something turns into sugar right away, the sugar goes up quite a bit. The pancreas has to work really hard to make more insulin. And when insulin keeps surging really high to kind of keep that sugar down, because it keeps going up. So say, what happens is that this insulin level is fat promoting, it's inflammatory, it has a role. Insulin is very critical to us living because it helps sugar go into the cells. But if we're constantly pumping out the foods that have sugar in it, constantly doing that, it not only strains our pancreas, but it also allows for insulin to be resistant and insulin levels to float around really high. So we want to kind of combine our carbohydrates to complex carbohydrates. And this is one of the lists, and we want to try to shoot for more low glycemic carbohydrates. So this is a nice list of things that are quite shockingly, very high. And that's the white stuff, the white bread, the white bagel. And then something that's very low, are things like nuts and seeds and beans. I love beans for that reason. And lentils, they're proteins, they're carbs, they're just loaded in good stuff. And so really, when you look at this, you can start to combine things like, for example, I have no option but to eat a piece of toast, right? So that's going to turn into sugar pretty quickly. But I can put avocado on it, which is fat, and I can put some seeds on it, which is also going to have some fats and carbs in there, which will change the way that bread goes. It doesn't go immediately up. It'll kind of go slowly and maintain that sugar level. So if I can give you an idea of what this is talking about, is I'm eating oatmeal, package of oatmeal, because it's really good for me. It says on the box that it's really good for my heart. I'm going to eat it. And basically it has no fiber in it. If you look at that label, it's all, and it may have some added sugar, right, in that packet. So what happens? Your sugar goes really high, and then your insulin goes really high, and then it falls really low because the sugar, and low sugar also is fat promoting. So now I have a high insulin, which is promoting fat. Now I have pushed down my sugar, and I have, again, another reason for, creating fat, but I'm starving again. In 2 hours, I'm really hungry and I'm craving something. So I go and I have, a granola bar. Again, my sugar goes really high. I look at the label. Wow, there's a lot of added sugar. There's no fiber in here. It's just carbohydrates because it's just turning into sugar. Straight up, it goes up. Again, in 2 hours, I'm plummeting again. This is what most of us are doing all day long. A huge source of fatigue post-lunch is because of this insulin spike. So if you start to look at this list, you can kind of tailor maybe your higher glycemic foods towards the night and the lesser glycemic foods in the daytimes to keep you awake and alert, right? So you can start to not only eat well and feed the body lots of good plant-based foods, but you can also kind of regulate your sleep-wake cycle and also kind of your fatigue level during the day. Okay, so at the end of the day, the message is food is information. It is information for this gut bug. Carbohydrates are not the enemy. They're really important for cellular and brain energy, and they're more efficient for energy than fats and proteins. So you want to try to get more fruits, vegetables, dairy, grains. I'm not a big dairy person because I'm more plant-based, but some people, just as a concept, the dairy does have some natural sugars in there. It's also in pastries and candies and juices, but those are not equal. What's in a fruit and what's in a pastry is not equal sugar. And the way it raises your glucose is very different. So when you eat more carbs than you need, you will be stored as fat. It is not going to get stored as glycogen as much, which is the storage of how you store glucose in the liver. It's going to be stored as fat. We have a love-hate history with carbohydrates, right? We want carbs. When we're tired, when we're stressed, when we're anxious, we crave carbs, right? So we have this intense relationship with it. So it's really important to also understand why we're kind of choosing for carbs. If I walk around all day, I'm so hungry today. What is going on? I'm just craving sugar. I want to think about, how did I sleep last night? What am I worried about? Am I really stressed out? Did I work out? So really think about the reason you're reaching for carbs. Another slide that looks at just the concept of the complex carbs and how good carbs can look like. These are good. These are sweet potatoes and white potatoes do have a higher glycemic index, and I'm not saying that they're good for everyone all the time, but they are complex carbohydrates and they can have a role, especially if you're sleep deprived. These are sweet potatoes, really nice to have in the evening. It kind of induces more of a restorative sleep. So, things that can be, if you don't have diabetes, if you don't have a weight problem, maybe start using more of these complex carbs into your diets. And these are simple carbs, which are things that we want to stay away from, cakes and candies and refined sugars, syrups, juices. And so they are ones that don't have any minerals in there. Unlike fruit, they don't have any minerals or fiber or colors, right? So colors on these fruits are also really important. So all of these are not equal, which is the point I wanted to make. Okay. So there were studies that showed that, if you added fruit to a diabetic, like a blueberry, because it's got fiber, it's got antioxidants, it's got nutrients, it blunts the insulin spike. So counterintuitive to what we think, which is I'm eating sugar with my oatmeal, it is actually going to help you most of the time to kind of combat that sugar spike and that insulin spike. So bottom line, fruit does not adversely affect blood sugar the way that industrial sugar does, which is the cane sugar that's processed in most of the food. Having said that, one of the things that I have found are these wearable devices called continuous glucose monitors, which can really help people understand what their food intake and their activity level is doing for them. I can speak about this, but in different people's bodies, based on their gut microbiome, based on their medicines, based on their health, it can do different things. So at the end of the day, I have started recommending maybe 2 to 3 weeks of these continuous glucose monitors, which are not usually covered by insurance.